750 workers walk out of the GM Oshawa plant on a Friday morning and do not know if they are coming back. It is May 2025. The plant is not closing because of a strike or a flood. A tariff signed in Washington just made every Silverado built on this floor too expensive to export at a profit. The truck carries a 25% tax the moment it crosses into the United States. GM runs the numbers. One shift has to go. So 750 workers pack their gear and leave a building that has been making vehicles since 1918. Unifor President Lana Payne calls it a reckless decision that ripples through the entire supplier network. Another 1,500 supply chain jobs disappear that same week. Nobody in Washington issues a statement about Oshawa. Hi viewers. Quick question for the comments. Did you know the engines inside the Ford F-150, America's best-selling truck, are manufactured in Canada? Drop yes or no below. What you are about to learn changes everything about this trade war. This did not start in Oshawa. It started 4 months earlier, in February 2025, when Trump signed an order hitting Canadian imports with a 25% tariff. He cited drug smuggling. He cited national security. What he did not calculate, what nobody around him appeared to have modeled, is what a 25% tax does to a supply chain that crosses the border 8 times before a single vehicle rolls off a line. The auto industry was about to show him. 3 phone calls go to the White House in the same week. Ford CEO Jim Farley, GM CEO Mary Barra, Stellantis Chairman John Elkann, 3 of the most powerful people in American manufacturing, calling the same number, delivering the same message. The 25% tariff on Canadian auto parts is not a negotiating chip. It is not pressure that the industry can absorb. It is a tax on a system so deeply integrated across the border that imposing it is like taxing your own bloodstream. Here is what the tariff architects did not appear to understand. A single vehicle built in North America does not stay on one side of the border during production. Parts and components cross between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, an average of 6 to 8 times before the finished vehicle rolls onto a dealer lot. An engine block cast in Ontario ships to an assembly plant in Michigan. A transmission built in Indiana comes back to a plant in Windsor. Wiring harnesses, brake assemblies, aluminum stampings. They cross, get worked, and cross again. The 1965 Canada-US Auto Pact built this system deliberately. 60 years of integration made it the most efficient auto network on Earth. Trump's tariff did not just hit Canadian products, it hit the entire circuit. Ford CEO Jim Farley said the tariffs would blow a hole in the whole industry. The F-150 engines, built in Windsor, Ontario, cannot be moved overnight. The White House takes the calls. The tariffs stay. Canada does not panic. Canada calculates. Within 3 weeks of Trump's February tariffs, Prime Minister Mark Carney announces retaliation. Canada hits $30 billion worth of American goods with matching tariffs. Carney does not blink on camera. He does not raise his voice. He looks directly into the lens and delivers a message that lands very differently from what Washington expected from a former central banker turned prime minister. Canada will not back down, he says. But the counter tariffs are only the part of the response that makes the headlines. The part that does not make the headlines is more consequential. Carney's government begins a quiet audit of its own strategic options, not just in trade, but in geopolitics. Canada is sitting on leverage that Washington has been taking for granted for 60 years. A $700 billion annual trade relationship, the largest supply of steel and aluminum to the United States, 22% of American steel imports, 47% of American aluminum, oil, natural gas, auto parts, and something Washington is only beginning to register. Canada is America's largest customer for vehicles, buying more American-made cars and trucks than any country on Earth. But the move that changes the entire board comes on January 16, 2026. Carney announces a landmark deal with China. Canada agrees to open its market to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles per year at a tariff of just 6.1%. In exchange, China cuts its tariff on Canadian canola oil from 84% to 15%. And more importantly, China agrees to invest directly in Canadian EV production capacity. Washington reads the announcement and goes completely still. Trump's response arrives on Truth Social before the Canadian press conference ends. He threatens a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods if Canada finalizes the China deal. 100%. Now that is not a trade policy. That is a wrecking ball. A 100% tariff on Canadian imports would effectively end bilateral trade in dozens of sectors and raise consumer prices across the United States by an estimated 1.5 to 2% almost immediately. Energy prices, auto prices, grocery prices, all of it, because Canada supplies things the American economy cannot quickly replace. Then Trump goes further. He threatens to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a billion-dollar crossing between Windsor and Detroit that took years to build and is the single most important commercial corridor in North American trade. Blocking that bridge does not hurt Canada alone. It shuts down the supply chain that feeds American auto plants on the Michigan side of the river. Meanwhile, the plants keep bleeding. IGM permanently closes its CAMI assembly plant in Ingersoll, Ontario. 1,150 jobs gone. The Stellantis plant in Brampton, 3,000 workers already on layoff, gets its restart date pushed back with no new timeline. Ford's Oakville plant sits idle, mid-retool, 3,200 workers at home. GM Oshawa eliminates its third shift. Another 700 jobs. Louis John, president of John Engineering, a Canadian auto supplier, says it plainly to a reporter from the Detroit News. "This is definitely the worst I have seen it in 42 years. We are just trying to stay alive." Washington still does not move on the tariffs. Here is the number Washington does not want to say out loud. General Motors estimates Trump's tariffs will cost the company $4 billion in 2026 alone. GM's CEO Mary Barra tells investors the company faces a $3.5 billion headwind with no resolution in sight. Ford and Stellantis absorb their own billions. Toyota and Honda eat the tariff costs per vehicle because they cannot shift production fast enough. The American consumer is not insulated from this. The tariff does not disappear at the factory gate. It travels with the vehicle to the dealership. Analysts estimate new car prices will rise by an average of thousands of dollars per unit if the tariffs hold. Auto insurance follows vehicle prices. So does the cost of repairs. The tariff that was sold as a job creation tool is, in practical terms, a tax on every American who needs to buy or maintain a vehicle. Then, in early 2026, the United States Supreme Court strikes down several of Trump's tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The legal architecture holding part of the tariff regime together cracks. Trump responds by announcing a new global tariff under a different law. The fight moves to a new arena. But the damage to the supply chain is already done. Plants are closed. Workers are home. Investment decisions have been redirected. And looming over everything is a hard deadline that nobody in either capital is talking about loudly enough. July 1st, 2026. The mandatory review date for the USMCA, the trade agreement Trump himself signed in 2020 and is now threatening to blow apart. The clock is running. In Windsor, Ontario, and a city that sits directly across the river from Detroit, the mood is not what you would expect. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens stands in front of cameras and says something that no Canadian mayor has had to say in a generation. "We will always love Americans. You are our close friends. We have fought wars next to you. We have your back." He is not angry. He is pleading. Because Windsor's economy is the auto industry. The Stellantis plant across the river employs 3,800 people. The Gordie Howe Bridge, which Trump just threatened to block, is Windsor's economic artery. But underneath the diplomatic language, Canada is making moves that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Ottawa and Seoul announce a memorandum of understanding to bring South Korean auto manufacturing to Canada. Honda, which is already committed to a Canadian EV supply chain, is in active discussions about expanding. The China EV deal despite the controversy, brings direct investment into Canadian production capacity that Detroit cannot match right now. Canada is not waiting to find out if Washington will come to its senses. Canada is building alternative relationships at a speed that suggests it no longer believes the old relationship is guaranteed. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association sends a letter to Ottawa signed by the CEOs of Ford Canada, GM Canada, and Stellantis. They describe unprecedented headwinds to the integrated North American auto supply chain. They are not describing a future that looks like the past. 60 years built this industry. The people inside it are being asked to unwind it in real time, under pressure, is without a plan, because one administration decided the border that never existed for auto parts should suddenly become a wall. A Unifor representative at GM's Oshawa plant says something to a reporter that belongs on the front page of every newspaper in North America. The world can change on a dime right about now. You never know what's going to happen with Donald Trump. Auto has gone through ebbs and flows before. We've been down for a while, we come back. And we have to find our way through this one too. That is a person describing what it feels like to stand inside a system being dismantled around them. July 1st, 2026 is coming. The USMCA review date. The moment when both countries must decide whether the trade framework that holds North American manufacturing together survives, gets renegotiated, or collapses. Canada has a China deal. South Korea is at the table. Washington has a Supreme Court ruling it did not want, and a July deadline it cannot ignore. 750 Oshawa workers went home in May 2025. The question is, how many more go home before July? Here is what this story is really about. Not tariffs. Tariffs are numbers on paper. This is about what happens when a political decision crashes into 60 years of economic architecture built to be borderless, and what that crash costs real people in real towns on both sides of a river. Louis John in Windsor has made auto parts for 42 years. He is just trying to keep his shop open. The 750 workers who walked out of Oshawa have mortgages. Their kids go to school in that town. The 1,500 supplier jobs that went with them are not line items. They are people waiting to find out if they still have a livelihood. GM is absorbing $4 billion in losses. Ford's F-150 engines come from Windsor. The Gordie Howe Bridge, which Trump threatened to block, carries the parts that keep American plants alive. Canada did not want a China deal. Washington left it no other option. This is what a trade war looks like from the inside, not from a podium, from a plant floor where the line stopped, and nobody can say when it starts again. If this story opened your eyes to what is really happening in the North American economy right now, share it with someone who needs to understand it. Drop your perspective in the comments. This conversation matters, and your voice is part of it. Subscribe to the Economic Records and turn on notifications. Because the USMCA deadline is July 2026, and when that story breaks, you're going to want to be here. The records never lie.